Bueno, pues muy buenas tardes. Me voy a permitir a nombre de la Universidad de Guadalajara y el Centro Universitario de Ciencias Económico-Administrativas darle la más cordial bienvenida a esta conferencia magistral. Siempre es muy positivo que tengamos interacción con expertos de talla internacional y el día de hoy estamos muy complacidos en contar con una experta que pues, nos va precisamente a compartir algunas de sus experiencias. Tenemos un nombre de la conferencia, la creación, o la voy a decir en inglés, Creating a Wise Community Online and Assessing the Process of Social Construction of Knowledge. Nos acompaña de la Universidad de Nuevo México la doctora Charlotte Lani Gunawardena, y bueno, ella es profesora de Educación a Distancia y Tecnología Pedagógica del Programa de Tecnología Instructiva y Aprendizaje Organizacional del Departamento de Educación de la Universidad de Nuevo México. Es doctora por la Universidad de Kansas, experta en Educación a Distancia y Comunicación Intercultural, asesora del Banco Mundial en Sri Lanka, y bueno, comparte con nosotros hoy algunas de sus visiones y sus investigaciones al respecto de tecnología educativa y la creación del conocimiento en redes. Entonces, muchas gracias, Lani, por acompañarnos el día de hoy aquí en el CUCEA, para que por favor, pretendemos hacer de esto algo interactivo, entonces va a haber oportunidad para que participen, entonces cualquier cuestión, cualquier comentario que tengan, lo pueden escribir y posteriormente se les cederá la palabra para que puedan entrar en un diálogo con Lani. Entonces, sin más preámbulos, les pediría que recibiéramos, agradecemos al Presidium que nos acompaña, está la maestra Yolanda Quintero, coordinadora de la Maestría en Gestión y Políticas de Educación Superior, y la maestra Julia Yolanda Díaz Pulido, coordinadora de posgrados del CUCEA. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. Y sin más preámbulo, les pediría un aplauso para recibir a Lani Gunawardena. Adelante, por favor.
Okay, thank you for welcoming me to the University of Guadalajara. I'm coming here after 10 years. I have had a long-term relationship with the University of Guadalajara since like 1993, I think. And I used to come for the big conference you have with the International Book Fair and talk about distance learning. Maestro Manuel Moreno has been a very good friend and colleague for a long time. And the last time I was here was in 2003 when we came and did some workshops. And now I'm back again. So I'm very happy to be back in Guadalajara. I think it's a very innovative university. You are really trying to do what is right for students, to provide access to education. So, as I understand, you're a group of students from the Learning Technologies Master's Program, right? All of you? Okay. So, what I do at the University of New Mexico is to really train people like you to be professionals in the fields of instructional design, learning technologies, and at the doctoral level, researchers in the field of learning technologies and distance learning. So my passion for a long time has been in the area of distance learning, and I have combined my interest in distance learning with cross-cultural issues in adult learning. So now I can see the two fields coming together, because now with distance learning actually spreading all over the globe, we now have to deal with a lot of cultural issues. So I just completed writing a book on cultural issues and online learning, global and research perspectives, with my colleague In-Sung Young, who is based in Japan. She's a Korean who works in Japan. And the book will be coming out sometime in spring. So cultural issues are also a great passion, because I do feel that culture influences the way people learn. And so we need to take that into account when we design learning environments. Okay, now a few questions for you. How many of you have taken courses in instructional design? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you have taken courses in how to design online learning? A few. Okay. How many of you have taken courses in adult learning or learning theories? Okay, so most of you have. Okay. Great. So what I want to do now is to talk to you a little bit about a design model that we developed and that I have used for designing online learning environments, and then talk about how we use another model to evaluate and assess social construction of knowledge as it happens online. Okay? So how many of you have been enrolled? How many of you have enrolled in an online class or taken an online class? Okay, good. So most of you have taken an online class. That's great. What is the platform you use? Blackboard, Moodle? Moodle. All right, great. In fact, I have a student from the University of Guadalajara who's one of my doctoral students right now, and he's an expert in Moodle. So he got his experience here, and when I have any Moodle questions, he's the one I go to. We use Blackboard to teach, but I personally think that Moodle is a much more versatile platform, and also if you're going to really work with global audiences, you need to work with Moodle. Okay, what do I do at the University of New Mexico? My main function is that of a professor. So I teach and I research. And the courses I'm teaching this semester are two courses. One, a doctoral level seminar on advanced instructional design, and then a master's level and a master's and doctoral level course on culture and global e-learning. The course on culture and global e-learning is entirely online. And I have students not only in New Mexico, but I also have students in different parts of the United States. So I have one student in the West Coast in San Francisco. I have another student in Maryland on the East Coast. So when I develop these online synchronous meetings through web conferencing, I have to match all those time zones so everybody can participate. Next spring semester, I will teach one in e-learning course design and another one on cross-cultural issues in adult learning. I also teach advanced courses in evaluation and research in distance learning. So my area focuses on distance learning, on instructional design, and culture. Those are the courses, types of courses that I teach. Okay, how many of you have attempted to design an online course? You have taken coursework, but have you really designed? Yes. So we have one. Okay, great. You too. Okay, great. Can you tell me the courses you designed? Excellent. Okay, great. Teaching English as a second language, and your course?
Design, graphic design.
Graphic design. Okay,
Yes.
good. And have you offered them online already? You have taught them online?
Well, I'm still working on it, but I was working in some activities before. So it's not like a program, but just some activities gathered all together.
Okay, excellent. What about yours?
It's in process.
Excellent. Great. Now let me ask you the next question. How many of you have taught online? Have you been a facilitator online and been responsible for teaching online? Okay, great. Can you tell me whether it is the same as face-to-face or different?
No, absolutely, it's different. It's totalmente diferente.
Totally different. Excellent. All right. Anybody else who'd like to comment? All right. Since you said it's different, can I ask you why you think it's different?
Bueno, porque el papel del profesor es completamente diferente. Tiene que acercar a los alumnos al contenido sin ser el profesor el propietario de la información, sino un puente. no estás ahí, entonces la gente no te ve la cara, no escucha tu tono de voz ni tus formas. La mayor parte de la comunicación es por escrito y eso puede ser muy áspero. Hay que cuidar mucho las formas del lenguaje, la puntuación, la cadencia con la que se escribe para que sea lo más accesible posible, y eso es algo a lo que no estamos acostumbrados, por lo menos en México. Y luego está la parte en la que en muchas situaciones es asincrónico. Entonces, ellos tienen duda cuando tú no estás conectado, contestas cuando ellos ya se perdieron o ya resolvieron como pudieron, y demuestra lo dependientes que somos del profesor para buscar nuestras preguntas, para resolvernos en clase. Y bueno, esa es una de las muchas, eso sería.
Okay, that was excellent. She addressed many of the issues that make online teaching different than face-to-face teaching. So if you're really going into online teaching, you have to change. And one of the things you mentioned was that it's not something that we are familiar with in Mexico. So if the culture itself cannot accommodate the learning process, then there has to be a few shifts and changes. So my first course that I taught online was in 1992. And because I went through such a tremendous change, I had to really change the way I taught. I wrote about my experiences and published this article on changing faculty roles for audio graphics and online teaching, and published it in the American Journal of Distance Ed. So that article actually explains how I changed as a professor and when I went online. And one thing I realized was that I had really opportunities to change my ways of teaching, and not only that, actually make the learning experience better for my students. And so I actually brought those changes that I experienced in my online environment back to my classes, my face-to-face classes, and actually changed my face-to-face classes as well. So now we live in an age where there is really no big separation between face-to-face and technology, because all of us are now using more or less technologies to teach. So I wouldn't focus so much on technologies, but how to design learning environments that support diverse learners. And we have diverse learners, especially when we work with different communities. So what I'm going to do is, let's flip my slides. Okay, I'm going to try to answer a few questions for you. And these will be based on two main areas that I have worked on recently. One is trying to develop design models to facilitate online learning design. And the second one is to look at how to assess knowledge that happens online. So I'm going to start with talking about what skills are needed in a knowledge-based society. So what type of skills do employers need from employees today? And of course, you have to remember, I'm coming from the United States perspective, but I do a lot of international work. And so I see that these trends are actually fairly international now. The second one is, can these skills be developed in online learning communities? Then, what are the main components of our WISCOM model, or Wisdom Communities learning design model, that was developed to address ill-structured, authentic learning environments? So I'm going to talk to you about the instructional design model that was developed in actually one of my classes and that we use to design and test. Then what is the theoretical basis of WISCOM? What does an online course built with WISCOM look like? And how do we assess social construction of knowledge that occurs in a learning community built with WISCOM? So I'm hoping that as students of learning technologies and instructional design, you might be interested in these kinds of questions. So the first question is, what skills are needed in a knowledge-based society? So essentially, the premise of a knowledge-based society is that information changes all the time, and that the people who really have some say in what happens is those who have access to knowledge and who can readily access it and process it. So the old skill set was know. We had to know things, so we focused our courses on designing for content delivery. We had to deliver this bunch of information to our students, and so we designed based on that. Oh, wait, I forgot to change the slides here. And then the new skill set then is to filter, think critically, prioritize, connect, negotiate, integrate, and create. So the skill set has changed from, so if you go back to the question, what skills are needed in a knowledge-based society? The old skill set was to know, and the new skill set was to filter, think critically, prioritize, connect, negotiate, integrate, and create. Now, if you look at this new skill set, many of our instructional design models, like based on the ADDIE model that you're familiar with, the basic instructional design model, they don't give a lot of guidance on how to design for enhancing these kinds of skills. And remember that in any course that we design, we also have to facilitate these skills. So we felt, how can we design to really enhance the development of these new skills in our online learners, in our learners? Wait. Sorry. Okay. So, acquiring knowledge is no longer a sufficient learning outcome because information changes rapidly. And then the new essential skills are negotiating meaning within teams and groups. These are these virtual teams that we have in workplaces today who are connected through these internet technologies, creating new context-sensitive understandings, and then producing novel solutions to real-world problems. So these are some of the new skills that we need to develop. So the question is, can these skills be developed online in learning communities? So how many of you have had experience in your classes that you have taken online to be part of a learning community or a group of learners? How many of you have done like group activities online together? All right? Okay, excellent. So now the question is, if we can create these learning communities online, how can we develop these new skill sets? Okay, the first premise that we all have to go with when we go to the online environment or any technology-based learning environment is that the learner is central to the learning experience. And this is one major difference between face-to-face and online. Like face-to-face, I can control this situation because I'm standing here up on the podium and you are my listeners. So I control the learning experience. But when you go online, the instructor doesn't have any control because students are connecting from their own computers at places that's convenient for them. So the instructor no longer has this kind of control I have right now in front of you. So we put the learner in the center and we look at how to connect the learner to many different kinds of networks. One network or one important resource in an online learning environment is the instructor. The instructor's place has not gone away. It has changed, as you wonderfully explained. So the instructional tasks that we do as online teachers have changed to more in terms of facilitation. Then peers, our fellow students, are critically important. Often in the old model of learning, we have looked at peers as not having so much to contribute. But now we need to look at peers to enable them to also contribute and lead the learning experience. Then we can connect any expert that we want into our classroom because we can bring them online. And in my classes, I have the textbook authors come and talk to my students. I have different mentors who come and talk if they have a specific expertise in a specific area. Then we have a whole host of multimedia resources, electronic libraries and databases that we can provide access to, and other communities. So for example, I can connect my class with a class in the University of Guadalajara, and so there would be another community of learners, and other people in the community who can also support learners. Many mentors. In my classes, I usually have my students do real-world problem-solving projects. And then I have a mentor who has understanding of that problem to facilitate the learning for my students. So let me give you an example of one of those projects. One day when I was at a conference like this, I was doing my talk, and there was a physician from Ghana in the audience. And after I finished my talk, he came to me and he said, "Lani, I think this is the reason I came to this conference." It was a conference that was held in Albuquerque on cross-cultural research. And so we were all presenting on different topics. Our main theme was cross-cultural research. And he said, "You know why? Because I have this physician assistant program in Ghana that I set up to address the acute shortage of physicians to serve in rural communities in Ghana, because Ghana has a huge brain drain. Many of their certified doctors leave the country, and now they have hired a lot of Cuban doctors who work in Ghana, but they need to train their own people. But training doctors in Ghana is a very expensive and long-term enterprise. It's much easier to train physician assistants, those who assist doctors, so that they can actually serve the rural communities that they live in. So if you train people in their own communities, it's more likely that they'll stay in their communities and support their communities." So Dr. Benjamin Aflaq-Pui set up this physician assistant program. He himself is an obstetrician and gynecologist. And two problems he was really concerned about was the huge rate of infant mortality. Many babies were dying, and an improvement of maternal health, how to improve the health of mothers. And these two are actually two UNESCO goals. So when he came and told me about this problem, I said, "I know how to do distance learning, but I don't know very much about Ghana. I'll have to learn. And maybe one of the things I will do is assign this project for my students so that they can try to figure out how to do this." So I assigned this project in my cross-cultural issues class one semester, and this was all done by online learners. The second semester, another class developed it further, and it went on. So from 2009 or 10, since I met him, we have been developing this project. Last year, he sent us a grant proposal from Grand Challenges Canada, and he said, "Here is a proposal that we can write to and get money to do my project, because it addresses exactly the issue that I'm trying to address, which is global health, improving global health." And so he said, "I don't have any experience writing grants. Can you help?" Again, I assigned it to the students who had been working, and they volunteered. This was not part of a class, but the students who worked with him on this project actually got connected, and so decided to do this project. And then we wrote a grant proposal, and fortunately, I didn't even think it would get funded. It got funded. And so my students are now actually doing this project in Ghana. This summer, I went to Ghana, help him set up the project. I had my first student, who is also a complete online learner. He lives in California. I have never seen him. He went to Ghana a month ago, and did the student training to help those students understand how to learn online. And my other students are actually designing the course online in obstetrics and gynecology, which we don't have any experience on. So Dr. Ben uploads his content to a Dropbox. We take it and we process it and we design it and put it up on Moodle. So this is how it's going. But it's a real world problem that my students got engaged in and are solving right now. And I have another group of students going in February to design 2 other classes. So designing real world problems and assigning real world authentic problems helps students to really understand issues and help bring solutions. So mentors become really important because Dr. Ben was a mentor in my classes for a long time. And then we have distance ed coordinators. So this is the premise I use to design online learning. Okay, so many of you know about Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. And I'm going to quickly skip over this slide. It is really about moving from more instructor-led to more peer-facilitated, blended blogs and wikis. Because social media has now enabled everybody to be a producer of information, okay, and connection. So, where organizations were top-down, now it's bottom-up with peer to community identified experts. And from management hierarchies, we are moving more on to mentoring and knowledge networks. So the field is changing. So what we've done is moved from Web 1.0, which was really more of a dissemination of information, to Web 2.0, where social media tools foster interaction, collaboration, and contribution. And this has really enabled us to design differently for online. So this brings me to my next question. To describe my design model called Wisdom Communities, we call it WISCOM, and how the model works. The purpose of this model was that ADDIE types instructional design models, which is important to know, help us to design content-based learning environments where we have a set of content for students to learn. But when the content becomes issues related to solving problems like the one in Ghana, issues related to where you don't have any one answer but multiple answers, multiple perspectives, then the ADDIE model really does fall short. So we felt that in order for learning to happen, we need to support the formation of collaborative learning cohorts. So practically all my online learning environments are all based on group-based learning. During the first week, I have everybody talk with each other, get to know each other, and then during week 1, second week, and third week, I put them into groups. The first group is a peer group that works with each other to support learning throughout the semester. And the second group is the design project group, the group that creates something new for a specific organization. So they work in these little collaborative groups throughout the semester so that they support each other and learn from each other, so that peer learning becomes important as well. So we need to provide instructional designers and instructors with a clear-cut but flexible set of considerations to foster wise online communities. And we have to prompt learners to transform data into information, knowledge, and ultimately to wisdom. So where many courses might be based on information, we need to move people now to processing information and then becoming wise based on that information. So, and this happens through the interactions with content, instructors, and peers. And we need to create environments that are conducive to transformational learning so people can actually reform and change their perspectives. Now, what that means is that you have to change the grading structure. You cannot grade the students the same way you would grade students if they were performing individually. So one of my major tasks has been to really devise methods for assessing collaborative group work. And I think I have become fairly good at it now, that my student groups really work well. This semester, fortunately, I have no problems. I have 4 groups, no problems. Last semester, I had 1 problem. But little by little, the problems I'm having with group work and people not performing is now being reduced. So that's another skill to develop for an online teacher. So here is the model. And I want to draw your attention to this center. This is a key component of this model, mentoring and learner support. Online learning will not be successful unless there is good mentoring and good learner support. And this is what the new instructor has to do. When the instructor moves online, this has got to be the focus. Mentoring so that students can achieve their own goals. Each student will have different goals. And providing the kind of support they need. Now, in any class, you will find that some students don't need support. They can do it on their own. They have mastered the art of learning how to learn. But in other classes, students need a lot of support. There are some students who are with you all the time, emailing you, asking you for feedback. Those students need support. In an online class, if we forget those students, most probably they will become disappointed and drop out. So in our design model, we have put mentoring and learner support as the most important aspect of any online class. Then we have, around mentoring and learner support, we have the concept of community. And community is important because learning is going to happen in a community. It's a community of learners, not one individual interacting with the computer, but it's a community of learners that are connected with each other. So developing community is another skill that we all need to develop. Next. How does learning happen in this environment? So we have mentoring and learner support as given, community as given. Okay, how do they go through what we call knowledge innovation? First, they are assigned a problem, a case, or a challenge to solve. Students in small groups explore this. They make a list of what they know, and they make a list of what they don't know. And then they look at resources that they can use to understand the problem, and they reflect on it. And they reflect on it and negotiate their learning. So reflection on the resources that different group members have shared, and they negotiate and create new meaning. And then the cycle starts again. So eventually we feel that by learning through many multiple perspectives, that they are able to actually engage in transformative learning, which we define for this model as changes in perspectives as a result of interaction with other perspectives, and then the eventual movement to wisdom. Now, wisdom is an interesting issue. What is wisdom? Anybody like to define wisdom? There are different cultural interpretations on who a wise person is. Sternberg the person who has written a lot on intellectual development, along with people like Howard Gardner, wrote a book called Wisdom, and in that he talks about foolishness, and what is foolishness and what is wisdom. And so by understanding what foolishness is, you figure out what wisdom is. And essentially how he defines it is that foolish people don't know the limits of their learning. They think they know it all. Wise people understand that they have certain limits on their learning and are willing to learn from others, to engage in multiple perspectives, to process it, and then inform others and engage in a continual cycle of learning. In fact, in our program, we offer a course called Cultural Perspectives on Learning and Wisdom, which is a very popular course. And we have so many different cultural perspectives on how different cultures define what a wise person is. And it would be interesting for me to discuss with you afterwards about how would Mexico define a wise person. But essentially, we want people to become wise, to learn from others, to figure out what are the limits on their learning, and learn to engage in problem solving. So, a wisdom community with distributed intelligence, mentoring, and other support, and knowledge innovation create an environment conducive to transformational learning. Okay, so the 4 steps in the cycle begins with the emergence of a case, a question, a problem, or an issue, and you experience a trigger, you engage in exploration, you integrate findings, and you reach a resolution. So that really is what the WISCOM model helps us to do. And this model has been used at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, to design courses, especially for language learning, and a few other places, including us. Okay, so I'm going to show you next Sternberg's Processes of Wisdom, and this is from Sternberg and Jordan. And he talks about wisdom manifesting itself as a series of processes that are typically cyclical and can occur in a variety of orders. And these are the processes or meta-components of thought. Recognizing the existence of a problem and defining that problem, representing information about the problem, formulating a strategy for solving the problem, and allocating resources to the solution of the problem, and evaluating feedback regarding their solution. In foolishness, the problem-solving process is defective. One misdefines the problems one faces. So if you look at this process and go back to our WISCOM model, essentially the knowledge innovation cycle here is a problem-solving process, right? Okay, so now, what are the model's components? A community based on distributed intelligence, which means that you have to create this community. You have to help the community negotiate meaning. You have to help them collaborate on learning goals. And community becomes the central learning activity. And the assessment must reward collaboration. So in my classes, where I have moved into collaborative learning, the points that they get is for both the process as well as the product. And it is always a group grade based on the product and the process. And then I assign individual points for individual contributions to that group grade. But the grade belongs to everybody, whether they have worked on it or not. Second one is mentoring and learner support, which is so critical. Mentoring responsibilities are distributed. You know, the teacher herself cannot do it all, need support. Each group member is a potential mentor. Peer mentoring is a very important one technique I use. And instructor mentoring involves scaffolding techniques like providing help, checklists, rubrics to help learners move through the process. The knowledge innovation cycle looks at the creation or discovery of knowledge and permanent preservation of it and retrieval of that knowledge, enabling of retrieved knowledge. So one thing that is really important is that in my classes, when a project finishes, the conclusions that that particular group of students came to is preserved in a forum called the Knowledge Artifacts Forum. And then the next group of students who come to the class the following semester actually start off from there and take the project further. So in many of my classes, I have continued projects like the Ghana project I talked about. So learning is a process that happens both individually via self-initiated exploration and collectively via sharing, questioning, and providing feedback. The teacher or the facilitator becomes both a guide and moderator and at times a co-learner. So in my classes that I have developed online using the WISCOM model, my role has been that of a facilitator, facilitating the learning experience, supporting, mentoring, scaffolding. So different from knowledge dissemination that we are used to doing. And then I am also very often a co-learner because when students are developing their group projects, I can see it going online in the group discussion forums, and I go and add my 2 cents and my perspectives to what they are developing so that they don't have to wait for my assessment till the project is over. They get my feedback right from the beginning. So my role has changed. It takes a lot more time to actually facilitate an online class than actually do a face-to-face class. So we see wisdom as a synthesis of perspective, insight, flexibility, and humility. And we stipulate that wisdom can be observed both in individual and in group dynamics. And I have been really assessing the group projects that I have had in my classes, and I have found that the group work, the products that they develop in the group are so much better than their individual assignments. One thing is online, they have to put more effort into group projects. So they have to engage in it more than they would in an individual project. So question 4 is, what's the theoretical basis for WISCOM? Okay, the theoretical basis for WISCOM is based on social constructivism. All of you are familiar with social constructivism, so I don't really have to detail that, where we believe that knowledge is co-created by the members of a group by a process of negotiation of meaning within the group. Also the concept of distributed cognition that was advanced by people like Edward Hutchins and Gabriel Salomon, who talked about knowledge as being distributed in the minds and the tools used. This is also based on Vygotsky's work, where tools mediate the learning process. So I firmly believe that the tools we use in our learning process actually mediate the way we construct new knowledge. So for example, I'm using a PowerPoint presentation here, and my presentation is very linear. From one idea to the next. It goes in a linear fashion. But if I use a program like Prezi, and some of you may be familiar with that, if you use Prezi, your learning process is more random. You go from one idea to another idea, and you interconnect. So the tool you use will mediate your final learning process. Okay, now take a more familiar example, a word processor. Developing a group paper on a word processor and developing a group paper using a wiki, the collaborative editing and writing tool. Now, if you use a word processor, what you're doing is you're usually mostly using the tracking function, right? So you edit, you send to somebody else, and somebody else edits it, sends it back to somebody else, and then you come back and you edit it, lots of colorful marks on your paper. Versus wikis which actually keep the history of your document together. And where you can go back to an older version, get what was deleted, come and put it back on, etc. So the way that a group would create that final document will be different based on the tool that they use. So if you go by the tool mediating the process, that is how the tools and humans that work with them mediate the learning that goes on. Situated learning is learning in authentic context, and mentoring and learner support mentoring is facilitating the learning process and movement towards goals, and supporting the learner wherever they want support. Knowledge innovation and management, we also draw theories of knowledge management in here, and transformational learning, how we can help people change perspectives as a result of multiple perspectives. Okay, so question 5. What does a course built with Viscom look like? Now, of course, if I had a good internet connection, I could have linked and shown it, but I have a few screenshots. So the design task first, as for you as designers, is to build a learning community. I firmly believe that technological systems are also social systems. So therefore, I have always been very interested in looking at the social aspect of a technological system. So creating the social environment and social presence is important. How many of you are familiar with the term social presence? Social presence is the presence we have of each other through mediated formats. So if I'm, let's say, talking on a telephone and you don't know me, what is the sense of my presence you have? Now, when we move online, most of the dialogue happens asynchronously through text-based format. What is the sense of the people you have online as a result of that interaction? It is really important to build this sense of people, because otherwise it is difficult to create a community online. And so the first week of my online classes are devoted to actually only learning about each other. So building a sense of who the other person is that you're going to be part of for this class. And when you create that social environment, and an environment that is easy for people to participate in, then it is more likely that people feel comfortable. So I want to share with you a study I did long time ago with the Monterey Tech Virtual University in Monterey, and talk a little bit about what we did. We were trying to look at how group process might be different in the US learning communities versus in the Mexican ones. They were actually teaching all over Latin America, so they had students from not only Mexico, but several other places. And we conducted focus groups. We had a survey, in terms of group process that was based on the Tuckman model. And then we also conducted focus groups. And the researchers from Monterey Tech Virtual University said that when they conducted the focus groups, one of the things they found was that some of the participants, some of the Mexican participants and the participants from Latin America said that they didn't really want to know too much about the other person. Because, there are hierarchies in society where power is distributed unequally. So if people say, oh, I'm the director of this company, I'm so-and-so, etc., that will be a problem for equalizing the learning environment online. And that they look to the learning environment online as an equalizing learning experience, and they didn't want people to interject social context cues that made the learning environment unequal. And so they judged people on what they wrote and what they contributed and not on who they were. So I learned a good lesson from this. So when I ask students to do introductions, I tell them to talk about themselves as professionals and professional people rather than as my position is this, so that we don't create inequalities in the learning environment, because online learning environments must be equal so that everybody feels comfortable to participate. This may be something you might have to work on here. I don't quite understand the social dynamics, but it was an interesting finding for us. In the US, although there are social differences, when you go online, many students feel they have equal opportunity to participate. And that's why they like online. Because in a face-to-face class, a few students will dominate, but online, everybody has a say. And everybody is able to contribute. So I would really look at the social dynamics of developing communities here in Mexico, because this is an interesting finding from that research study. So facilitating interaction is important, and providing learner support, mentoring, guiding, and tutoring. And also, knowledge construction doesn't happen by itself. You have to facilitate it. You have to help the groups to achieve group goals. You have to promote learning. You have to weave ideas, synthesize, and summarize. This is one thing that I do very frequently online when groups are discussing, is I look at the different ideas posted by different students, and I try to find connections between those ideas so that the students themselves are now able to see the connections. Preserving knowledge and managing information overload, because sometimes students are just overloaded by all the information that they have access to, and assessing learning and providing feedback. So these are some of the tasks that we have to really work on as we design for online learning. Oh, I'm sorry, I had the wrong slide. Okay, now this is a really bad one because, you cannot see the details. However, this is how I map the Viscom model into the online class. And essentially, it goes through initial exploration, resources and perspective, and reflection and preservation, negotiation and preservation. So the next one is the learner support system. So I look at all the different kinds of learner support that students need and tell them how to access the different kinds of support. So, sorry that you cannot see too well on your screen. Peer support is the one on the left. And I provide peer support in terms of support for project work, module work, and wanted help given forums, where I have an open forum and students go and write what help they want. You don't have to have every type of support I have here, but this maps out the different kinds of learner support you need to build into your classes. Then under institutional support, I have student services and link them to our student services. Distance education coordinators, what they can get help from there. Our OLIT program. And then for academic support, which is the right one, you have faculty resources. You know how to contact me, how to get my help. Community mentors, who they are. Tutorials and resources in terms of tutorials and library databases. The writing support centers they can go to. The writing tutor, which is an online support system. And the College of Education Writing Mentoring Center, where students can go and get help for mentoring. Then different kinds of course support. Frequently asked questions is a forum you can create. And technical support, whom to contact for technical support. In many of our online classes, most of the support is technical that they need. Communication and media support, how to get support for different ways of communication. For example, one type of communication we do in class is we also have synchronous sessions every week. And we use a system called Collaborate, which used to be Illuminate some time ago, somewhat like Skype. And very often there are technical problems when students drop out. So whom to contact when you have problems? Last week, I couldn't get into the class, to my collaborate session. And lo and behold, what happened was I was on a Mac and I ran an update. And Mac disabled Java on my update. And I didn't realize why. I couldn't go into my class. It took me 2 hours to work with the technical support people to figure out what happened. So technical support is really important for students learning at a distance. How to get that support, whom to contact, all that information must be made available. So somewhere within your course, you have to map the learner support that the students will have access to. Okay, assessing learning and providing feedback. The main thing is changing the culture of assessment and learning improvement. Thinking of assessing more as improving learning rather than assigning grades and seeing who is better than the other. It should be focused on the process of learning, not only the product, on the process of problem solving, collaborative learning, situated and distributed learning. Assessing group projects, individual and group grades, assessing individual participation, self-assessment, and then feedback focusing on strategies for improvement. So using rubrics is a really good way of assessment because students can self-assess their own work. I also have peer assessment. So I have rubrics and I tell peers to assess each other and provide feedback. And that's taken as an important type of assessment and as well as self-assessment. One of the self-assessments I do at the beginning of class is I have my students assess themselves on how they participated to community building in the class and how they participated in knowledge building in the class. And they I have this rubric, they grade themselves and say, I did this, I didn't do that. And very often their self-assessments are pretty accurate. Otherwise I tell them, no, you have given yourself a little bit too many marks on this, I cannot see evidence. So getting students to assess themselves is important because constantly as we go into workplaces, you will have to assess yourself and how you perform. So developing those skills of self-assessment, assessing peers, and doing it in a collaborative fashion is really an important point of this. Okay, self-assessment in terms of community building and knowledge building. This is what I just spoke about. So here are some questions, and I'm going to have the translator read that. Okay, thank you. So if you get your students to assess themselves on these criteria at the beginning of class, they then know what is expected of them modules. So they continuously now assess themselves on how they are contributing. Okay, here is a project I did in Sri Lanka, where I'm originally from. The Ministry of Education there set up a national online distance education system, and they asked me to come and train all the faculty to be online teachers. And so what I did was I trained them using the Moodle platform because I felt that in order to be a teacher, you have to be a distance learner first and realize what it is like. So I developed this course based on 14 modules from paradigm shift to roles of tutors and facilitators, what are the differences, and then to how to build community, how to help knowledge construction, how to assess, all of that. On the left side is the course menu, which maps out the learner support system for the class. So in Moodle, I put it a little bit differently. Okay, one of the things I want to talk to you about are the 3 inquiry-based learning designs that I had them do. I wanted to teach these faculty who were going to be online how to be online facilitators. So what I did was, I divided them, in every session I had about 30 participants. I divided them into 3 groups, and each group had to address a social problem in Sri Lanka. And in order for them to get some support on how to engage in an inquiry-based learning activity, I had my own students volunteer to be mentors, electronic mentors, e-mentors, for the student groups in Sri Lanka. The first group did a problem-solving activity to clean up garbage in the country's capital. The second group did a role play to solve traffic congestion in the country's capital. And the third group used a case-based reasoning activity to find a solution for street children in the country's capital. So these were the 3 activities. And so this is an example of the interactive learning forum. And where, the people engaged in the discussion. And here is a wiki. We also set up the Moodle wiki so that they can write the report. The outcome of this activity was that they had to develop a report that would go to the mayor of the city of Colombo. And so the groups got together and wrote this report. Now remember that my trainees were faculty from different fields. I had junior faculty members, I had senior faculty members, all of them that I had to work with. And so one of the things that really I was interested in is how did these groups socially construct knowledge. And I want to show you another model that I have developed, and this has been used since 1997 when we developed it, on how to assess social construction of knowledge. Okay, so when you have a group activity online, how do you assess what level of learning this group achieved? That's a difficult question to answer. How did individual students exchange ideas, learn from each other, and construct new meaning? That's the question I was interested in finding out. So this model was actually developed long time ago, as you see in 1997. It's still being used. Different people have modified it and used it. But essentially, what we look at is, initially in many groups, people, once a question, case, or problem is posted, they share information. They share and compare information. I did this, this is what I know, here are some resources. That's what happens. The second stage is more of one of dissonance. Dissonance is people introduce different and opposing points of view. And then the group begins to look at different ideas, look at what they shared, and create new kinds of meaning. When the group decides this is a new idea and goes and tests it out and figures out how to apply it, they have moved to more the higher levels of learning. So this is what this model actually represents. So phase 1 is sharing and comparing of information. Phase 2 is discovery and exploration of dissonance. And phase 3 is negotiation of meaning and co-construction of knowledge. Phase 4 is testing and modification of proposed synthesis or co-construction. And phase 5 is agreement statements, application of newly constructed meaning. So this is the model that we used. And I want to show you the Sri Lankan example. And I have it in another presentation here. So let me just Okay, so research question 1. Is how did the case-based reasoning inquiry learning method support social construction of knowledge and lead to transformative learning online? Our data using the interaction analysis model illustrated that social construction of knowledge occurred and was supported by groups negotiating the steps of the case-based reasoning process in the case-based reasoning exercise. Here are the phases of the IAM model, and you can see there were 3 rounds of students, faculty negotiating the case, round 1, 2, and 3. And you can see the first phase, sharing and comparing, is the highest, got the highest number of posts. So the vertical column is the highest number of posts. So in many discussion groups, what students usually do is to share and compare information. That's why phase 1 has the most number of posts. In this group, you can see the phase of cognitive dissonance is really rather low. Every group constructed new meaning, and then one group, especially group 3, really went into the higher level of learning of testing and testing the proposed new construction. Now, what is interesting about this is that, let's see. What is interesting about this graph, before I move on, is that in that 3rd round, there was an e-mentor who really mentored the students throughout the process and then stepped back. And then the students took over and went with it. So the mentoring style also impacts how social construction of knowledge will happen. Okay. Sharing and comparing necessarily involves awareness of others' perspectives. So even at stage 1, phase 1, people are sharing different perspectives. Interactions point directly to the beginnings of transformative learning. Wait. The discussion posts demonstrated critical reflection, awareness of others' perspectives, and changes of perspectives necessary for transformative learning. And here is a good example of transformative learning by the proteges. And I'm going to ask the translator again to read this out. Thank you. So this is an example of how the interactions with others changed people's perspectives. And this participant is saying, let's act. Let's not only discuss this issue online, but actually try to see how we can solve the issue of street children and make a difference. So this is how transformative learning can actually take place online through interactions with each other. So how did the international e-mentors that I talked about facilitate construction of knowledge online is the next one that I want to deal with. How did the international e-mentors, people that they didn't know, who came from the US and facilitated this activity for a period of 3 weeks, facilitate construction of knowledge. Wait. Oh, it doesn't appear here. I'm sorry. I have some graph. It doesn't come, right, the graph? Okay, so I'm going to skip this one. But I have 3 graphs showing how the 3 different E-mentors facilitated social construction of knowledge. And I was going to really talk about it, but unless you see the graph, it doesn't make sense. So I think it's because when I transfer it from the Mac to the PC, it doesn't come properly. Okay, so here's another activity this is part of my online classes at UNM, and assessment of whether how social construction of knowledge occurred. So here is the WISCOM model was used in Venezuela to teach graduate students, again like you, on learning technologies by one of my colleagues who developed this model, Ludmila Lane. And there again, the students, as you can see, the course design fostered a sense of online learning community. 70% agreed that the WISCOM model that the course was based on could really enhance that. And then this is a course at UNM where I teach. There it came. And this one, the course generated a sense of online community. 70% agreed. That is, predominantly most of them agreed that it did create a sense of community. And then sometimes I changed my perspective as a result of group interaction. 83% agreed, strongly agreed. So that was really amazing because this was something that they strongly agreed on, that the online community can change perspectives. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is to stop and ask you about questions that you have. Any questions, things I didn't address that you are interested in me talking about?
Tiempo de preguntas, compañeros. ¿Alguien que quiera comentar algo, que quiera aprovechar la presencia de Lani para preguntar algo? Compañero, adelante.
Okay, this is me over here. Actually, it's just a question. At the beginning, at the beginning, you were asking. The question was like, how many people had been in contact, with the online learning. Obviously, I suppose that most of us have been in touch or have experienced somehow the online learning. But my question is going on, it's based on the following thing, like how would you, or what would be some of the most general tips that you would give us in order to be basically involved in this kind of learning, like a very online learning, to be better students or better learners, as well as in the future, how to implement, this kind of learning strategies, like, how can this somehow, obviously, I like your presentation, by the way, thank you for that. It was nice and interesting, okay? But my question is basically based on that, some of the most general tips based on your experience, based on, obviously all the things that you informed, but, there are some other, like, very general tips. Thank you.
Can you hear from this mic? No? You can? Okay, great. You can? Okay, right? Okay, see. All right, good. In terms of general things, in terms of online learning, remember that different fields, different disciplines and different competencies require different kinds of learning strategies. And also, learners require different kinds of learning strategies. So that is the basic premise that you have to go by. If you're looking at it from the student point of view, one of the things to remember is that online courses are considered easy, and that's a myth. That means that if you're learning online, I think you're investing much more time than if you're doing a face-to-face class. Because when you're online, you don't want to appear as if you have not read what you were supposed to read. So you read. Many students come to face-to-face classes, they haven't read, they haven't prepared, they are not ready. But online students, I have noticed, are concerned about the amount of reading because they really want to read before they actually post. So that is one thing that I have noticed in online learners. The other thing is that they have to be very good managers of their time. If you don't have time management skills, the online course would have moved and you're left behind. And this can really be detrimental to some students because they feel that they have nothing more to contribute if the course has moved. Or if the groups are working on certain projects, they've already presented and you haven't participated, it's moved, it's gone. So online learning requires really good self-regulated skills, self-directed learning skills, time management skills, plus another very important one, information overload management. Many students online are often, you hear this question often, I am overwhelmed and I don't know where to begin, or I don't know where to start because there is just too much to do. I cannot handle this all. And so one of the things as a facilitator you've got to do is to really help them manage tasks. Very often, I hear these comments on email. They send it to me on email, and then I would say, now do this first. Once you have done this, do this next. Because I know, because I teach from a community-centered model, I know my students really well online. And I know the ones who need help the first 2 weeks. I can figure out who needs help in the class. So I observe these students, and I give them help. If I don't see them online, I ask them on email why they haven't been there. So one major strategy is to help these students develop the skills to become successful online learners. And not everybody is a good online learner, but everybody can learn how to be a good online learner. It takes a while to practice. Another thing I want to really address is that people who might be technologically savvy, we know that to be online, you need to be technologically savvy too, because you're using a technology now. If you're using Moodle, you need to know how to figure out Moodle. In our Ghana project now, that's the main thing. You know, people are new, they're trying to figure out a new learning management system, and actually we are combining mobile learning and e-learning there because students have been given these digital tablets like the Samsung tablets. And so that's what they're downloading the learning experience on and interacting on. So the technical issue is a big issue. However, here's an interesting point. Even a person who's technically savvy and may use computers for their work every day may not know how to use a computer for learning. And this is really interesting. This is something I found out. I did a consulting project for Intel. And as you know, Intel is a big technological company. They manufacture the chips that are in your computers. So all the engineers in Intel set up this, one of their fabs set up the corporate university through distance learning. So I was invited to come and do the evaluation of their first corporate learning venture. And one of the things I found out was that all these engineers were technically savvy. They didn't know how to use the computer to learn and needed help. So I think providing a lot of support for learners at the beginning is really critical. Hope it answered that.
Muchas gracias. ¿Tenemos tiempo para alguna otra pregunta? Acá la compañera Adelante.
Bueno, a mí me interesaría saber cómo es que se construyen estas comunidades de mentores. Es decir, invitan a los profesores, les dan alguna capacitación previa. ¿Cómo funciona esto de los mentores? Gracias.
Can you repeat that, please? I'm not getting it from this. Okay, go ahead.
Sí, mi pregunta es con respecto a cómo construyen ustedes las comunidades de mentores. Es decir, ustedes invitan a los profesores, ellos tienen, no sé, alguna remuneración por realizar este trabajo, reciben alguna capacitación previa para ser mentores. ¿Cómo es que construyen ustedes esta comunidad? Gracias.
Okay, this is an excellent question. Thank you. So the question is, how do you construct a mentor community online? And whom do you invite? Who will facilitate this? Now, in my Sri Lankan experience that I just talked about, I was, in Sri Lanka doing the training. I had taken a leave of absence from the University of New Mexico. I went to do this training. And I thought, what a wonderful cross-cultural experience this would be for my students to interact with these Sri Lankan faculty members and professionals in organizations. And so I just sent out an email list to my former students, and I said, graduate students, and I said, would you like to be mentors? They didn't really know what they had to do. They volunteered because they thought it would be an interesting experience. So people volunteer to do experiences that they think will benefit them, which is something that I found. I didn't expect them to volunteer. And I had about 10 students volunteer to do this. So if you are keen on getting certain types of experience, you will volunteer. Now, this is something that we have to make maximum use of as instructors. So once they volunteered, I knew I was going to put them in a situation where they had no understanding about the culture. They had no understanding about how they would interact with each other. So I had to give them an orientation to the Sri Lankan culture. And I did this online in Moodle. I had a little forum. I also developed personal guides for them. Here are some things you should do. Here are some things you should not do. And they followed the guidelines very well. They were very polite. They were very supportive. And the Sri Lankans loved it because they thought, here is a great opportunity. We are interacting with an international person who's actually helping us do this task. And so they were fascinated by the novelty of it. Another thing about volunteering is when you're an instructor, students come to you and ask for experiences to help them learn a skill better. At the beginning of this semester, I had a student, and actually she was not in our program, but she was helping us design our website. She's in a program in continuing education, and she came and told me, I know you do a lot of instructional design projects. Can you put me in a project where I can get instructional design experience? And then I said, well, the project that I need a lot of help in right now is the project in Ghana, because we are developing these courses in Ghana. And we are trying to develop it so that they are culturally relevant for Ghana, so that they originate the content and we teach them how to put it online. So that is one experience I can offer you. She said, I would love it. She took it on, and she has been one of the best designers, learning from the other students who are working with me on this, from me, all of us. And now I'm even sending her to Ghana next spring to work with the people in Ghana. So people volunteer for experiences that they want. You need to utilize that. But once you get mentors involved, you have to give them really good directions on what to do, because many people don't know what to do. There are also people who want certain projects done. For example, our School of Medicine at the University of New Mexico, there are many physicians who are also teachers who now want to put their courses online, or at least part of it online. And so now they have asked me for student help. So I assign a student to be mentored by one of them to design their course. Now I have a student working in a project called the ECHO project, which actually facilitates mentoring of physicians in rural communities in the state. So my thing is, use the networks you have. And this is why when we go online, another skill we have to develop as instructors is to develop networks of people who can help you with your class. Because I do these individual projects where we have to have students engaged in a real world project, I have mentors who help students facilitate that, accomplish the project. Right now in my advanced instructional design class, I have a physician from emergency medicine. They have an emergency medicine curriculum that is offered as an undergraduate degree to train emergency service people. These people are the people who work in ambulances, take care of, when you have a 911 call or emergency call. And he comes to my class. I mean, this is a very busy physician, but he comes to my class to talk to my students because he wants a project done. He wants this done for his program. So utilize the networks that you have, and that's, I think, the best thing I can say.
Muy bien. El compañero Luis López aquí adelante tiene una pregunta.
Hola. Quería preguntarte cómo crear esa presencia cuando tú mencionabas que había ciertos grupos que no querían saber mucho de otras personas sin caer en esa jerarquía. O sea, cómo generar ese tipo de presencia, si es el foco del trabajo colaborativo.
That's another excellent question. I want to ask you, is this true of Mexican culture? Is this true? If you're in an online class, and would you want to know about other people, or you don't want to know about them?
Pues depende, ¿no? También.
It depends.
No te va a afectar en lo que tú le puedas decir al otro, yo creo.
Okay, it depends. Excellent. All right, then you have to create your presence and your community carefully. One of the first things I did in Sri Lanka has a little bit of this issue of power distance in a society, where there are many social structures where they have more power than others. You understand what I mean, right? Okay. So when you have people of more status and lower status in the community, it creates an unequal sense of feeling, where you feel maybe if you're somebody from a lower status group, what I say may not be important. Sometimes women feel this way in a community which is dominated by men. So these social issues are present in every community. So as a designer, you have to be really cognizant of this. One of the things I did in Sri Lanka was that when I had asked people to introduce themselves, I told them exactly what to say. I said, give your name, tell us a little bit about your professional interest, not your rank or file, but your professional interest. I'm interested in nursing. And then tell us a little bit about your hobbies, what you like to do during your pastime. And tell us how you like to learn, whether you like to learn in a group or like to learn by yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Do not post a picture of yourself. Post an image that represents you in some way and say why the image represents you. So nobody posted pictures. Sometimes posting a picture itself can be a problem. So everybody posted images and then they said, oh, I like cricket, this is my favorite game, that's why I have a cricket bat in my image. And that generated more of a sense of community where the participants felt, okay, so I feel a little bit more comfortable here. I think the problem happens when people say, you know, I am so-and-so in a bank, and I do this for my living, etc. So that when you try to distinguish yourself from others as being superior, then that creates an unequal learning environment. So how you ask the students to introduce themselves to the community is key. Once I had a telecollaboration between my students and a group of students in Morocco. And one of the things we learned from that was the way the Moroccan students introduced themselves was very different to the way our students introduced themselves and presented their identity online. The Moroccan students' identity was really very tied to the regional area that they came from. And I knew this later, certain regions in Morocco are considered more prestigious than others. And so if you said you're a Fassi from Fez, that means you had more prestige than the other people. So when they were introducing these regionalities in their introductions, in presenting their identity, we in the US had no idea. We had no idea that they were actually trying to differentiate themselves from others in the group. That social cue did not come to us because we didn't know that regionally there were these differences. So even when you're putting people in cross-cultural learning situations like this, it is really important to be careful because there are different ways that students will interject social cues. And to keep a learning environment equitable, you have to try to diffuse some of that. So one major technique I have used as an instructor to make students who feel less comfortable participating is to write them personal emails. And after they post, I say, you've done really well. Thank you for your contribution. Even if they didn't say anything much, I do that, especially at the beginning. And that's a very important type of support the student needs to feel comfortable online. I hope.
Es que yo tenía una idea, por ejemplo, ahorita que mencionabas de crear presencia, era autograbar un video y pasarlo al grupo para saber quién eras, porque mencionaste de quién eras si no te escucho. Entonces, ¿es malo eso?
No, it's not bad to post a video. It's not that it's bad to post a video. In fact, in our online classes, we do post as instructors a video. However, sometimes students are reluctant to show themselves on video. Now, this is one of the things I have realized. Now, Americans generally, online, when you ask them to introduce themselves, will share a lot about themselves. They self-disclose a lot. They will talk about their family situation, they'll talk about their pets, they'll talk about anything and everything you don't even want to hear, but they'll say a lot. They have no problem saying that. But one of the things I have noticed is that they don't like to show themselves on video. So I have a synchronous learning platform that I do my web conferencing on. I'm the only one who turns on the video. They don't want to turn their webcams on, even if they have a webcam. And this is because they are reluctant, I guess, for people to see the context that they come from. One of the reasons I don't force my students to turn on video is because I know that there are also disabled students in my class who are taking online classes, and they don't know if sometimes the disabilities can be visible. And so they don't want people to see them. So even using video, you have to be a little bit careful. So I usually, one way to create presence is through the sharing of videos so that people have a sense of who you are. But there is also a great reluctance to share video because one of the reasons students prefer online learning is that they can be a little bit distant from others. You see, there is a real dichotomy here. Students like online learning because they don't have to come to a face-to-face situation like this and be part of another face-to-face group. They can be independent, they can be distant, they like that. And some of them will say, don't put me in groups because I like to work on my own. But I tell them, in my class, and especially when I teach about culture, one of the things you have to do is to learn how to work with others. And so you have to be in a group, and that is your learning experience in this class, because you have to learn these collaborative skills. So for every skill you want to develop, you have to really think twice. Okay.
Muy bien. ¿Alguna pregunta más? Parece que no, ¿verdad? Bueno, pues entonces, Lani, very special thanks for being here. Una pregunta acá, la compañera Carolina.
Ahora la tecnología ha cambiado mucho, la educación está cambiando y nos estamos enfrentando a lo que conocemos como los MOOC. Estos tienen dos tipos de evaluación, algunos totalmente selección múltiple, de conocimientos meramente de memoria, y otros se centran en trabajo colaborativo entre los estudiantes, se evalúan entre ellos. El rol del tutor o del mentor desaparece un poco. ¿Qué piensas tú respecto a esto? ¿Crees que solo con estas evaluaciones colaborativas se puede llegar realmente a desarrollar en su totalidad las habilidades? ¿Cómo se puede solventar esa falta de mentor que muchos MOOC están presentando? Y, o sea, ¿qué tanto ves tú de bueno o malo que podamos mejorar en estos MOOC respecto a diseño instruccional?
Okay, excellent. Another great question about MOOCs. Massive online open courses which have come into prominence, in the last couple of years. So the question was, what do you think about it? Because it looks as if the role of the mentor and the facilitator is disappearing in them. And do you think that group activities and collaborative learning can really develop these skills? That's the question, right? Okay. Now, what I feel is you have to consider MOOCs very carefully. The first few MOOCs that came about were really meant to disseminate information. So you have this very special professor who's world-renowned, and his perspective is now disseminated. But then there was a challenge against it. And there was this development of a Duke where they felt that one perspective itself is not enough. And that we need to look at other perspectives as well. And so in this particular situation, they developed the MOOC collaboratively between several institutions, and each institution facilitated it differently. But there was a mentor. So there was somebody who mentored. Only for me, teaching 33,000, 40,000 students in an interactive fashion is not possible, really. So if you want to really facilitate higher order learning and encourage that facilitation of learning, I think the MOOCs as they are not cutting the mark. So I want to give you an example. Okay, the example is, I enrolled myself in a MOOC. I don't know whether any of you, I'm sure all of you have tried the experience. But there was a MOOC called On Distance Learning by Georgia Tech University. Anybody did any of you enroll in that? Okay. And I enrolled in it because I thought, okay, this person is actually offering an alternative to the content delivery model. And how they did it was, they actually had a tutor, and the tutor had a little video saying, I'm going to be your graduate assistant, I'm your graduate assistant and I'm going to be tutoring this. And then they also encouraged you to get into groups. So each person who enrolled in the MOOC had to be part of a group, had to be part of a little community, and they had to set it up within the MOOC itself. So several of my students were interested. They invited me. I also joined. I looked at it. I joined. I thought this might be interesting. This is actually going to facilitate interaction. And so we built a little community of UNM students and former students. I mean, it was interesting because lots of former students also joined. 2 weeks later, the MOOC crashed. And the reason it crashed was that it couldn't really accommodate interaction. When they had 33,000 people enrolled, when 33,000 people started talking, the system could not handle it. And then, unfortunately, for this instructor who tried this experiment, she got a bad name. So, in the New York Times and in the Chronicle of Higher Education, there was this big headline about this MOOC crashing. But they didn't really go into the reasons it crashed. This instructor actually tried to set it up with a different learning model in mind to facilitate the learning process. But the system could not handle it, and that's why it crashed. So I think we need to follow her example, as you say, if we are really going to facilitate higher order learning and learning in the ill-structured domain. So what I was thinking of perhaps is, because we have all this social networking software available on the cloud, so you can have the MOOC for the massive online people, you can have your 40,000. But develop small groups in other platforms, like, you can have them in a WordPress site, in a blog site, blogger.com. You can have them in a Facebook. You can develop a Facebook site. So that the learning process will take place among a group of students. Now, what would be missing is that instructor feedback, because that's going to be missing anyway. So that's another big part that will be missing from that learning experience. But experienced learners can learn well together. That one I will go by, because I feel that they are adults and they have a lot of experience and an interest in the subject. They will research, share ideas, and learn together as a group. So I think collaborative learning as a format is worthwhile. But how it is done and facilitated is the problem. Personally, I think MOOCs are, right now, the MOOCs are really good for content delivery. One of my students took a JavaScripting class from Stanford University through CUCEA. And she said the course was great. And I told her to show it to me, and we went through the course. So all the interaction was the individual with the computer and the computer giving feedback. So the computer would give her a problem, a coding problem, she would input, then the computer would automatically grade and provide feedback. So there was that feedback loop, but for a task like learning a software program, that was good. But I think we still have a long way to go for higher order learning. But I think we need to try our hands at it and see if it works for us or not, depending on how we want to set it up. But I think there are some new movements to do more creative kinds of MOOCs in collaboration with each other, developing these little communities, etc. I think you may have already heard, this was in the news some time ago, when Pakistan, I think it was Pakistan, that stopped access to YouTube. And this particular MOOC was based predominantly on YouTube videos, used YouTube videos as, a predominant learning source. And when the country blocked, there was this very young student, I think it was a very young girl, about 12 or 13-year-old girl, taking this college class in, I think, physics or math. And she posted this message saying, I'm so sorry, I cannot do the assessments because we don't have YouTube videos anymore. Our country has blocked. Then the MOOC community got together and said, do not talk about this issue because you might be in trouble because your government has blocked it. But we are going to help you figure this out. And they figured out how to copy the YouTube videos and send the videos to her. Apparently, she took the exams and came out on top. So a community can get together to help each other also. That we know will happen. And it can be a worldwide community. So I think collaborative learning by itself has promise. But how it is set up and how the MOOC can accommodate it is the question. We still don't have good examples.
Muy bien, pues muchas gracias, Dr. Lani, for being here. Gracias al doctorado en Gestión de la Educación Superior, al doctorado en Tecnologías de Información, a la maestría en Gestión y Políticas de Educación Superior y los compañeros de la maestría en Tecnologías para el Aprendizaje que participaron. Y pues a nombre de la Universidad de Guadalajara, Lani, thank you for being here in CUCEA and welcome back to University of Guadalajara. Thank you y al aplauso.